use this app called Habitify to track this. Since I'm measuring myself, so on most days I'm able to achieve this, and I'm able to read more than most people because it's sort of like a pact that I created for myself, and I like to believe that it's a personal moat. So when you build personal moats and capabilities like these, and this is a small one, but when you build more such capabilities like that, and I'll just give an example. Like for example, the ability to deal with rejection can be another moat. So when you're getting rejected by investors, by potential employees, etc. So I'm just giving an example that that's how I think about life. um,
Hmm.
and because this is a pact that I make to myself, on most days I'm able to follow it, because it's not about I have to do this or not. It's a personal moat, it's a personal capability. I have to do it because I promised myself that I will do it till I'm alive.
Right, right. I mean, I love that willpower, Gaurav. I think because it's something that all of us struggle with. Anybody who sort of loves reading, finding the time to read is a challenge. But it's interesting. So when you're reading books and you said you also take notes, doesn't it feel very academic to do that? Don't you lose out the fun of reading when it becomes an exercise?
No, I think the final intent is to gain more knowledge.
Hmm,
And if I'm not making notes,
hmm,
see, you will not learn from a book by reading it once. You
hmm,
will need to at least go through it many, many times. And I
hmm,
don't want to go through the entire book again and again. Maybe I'll read the same book 2, 3 times. But
hmm,
after that, I should have notes that I can refer to every few months. For example,
hmm,
whether it's a book like 22 Immutable Laws of Branding or Blitzscaling or 0 to 1. I,
hmm,
I should have the best notes that I can re-reference every three
hmm,
months. Because
hmm.
I don't, again, as I said, this is about like a personal capability. This is about a moat that you're building, that you're learning and gaining knowledge on a daily basis. So I mean, I don't see this as a fun activity. I see this as a responsibility.
Interesting. And it's also interesting you say that because for some people the line gets blurred. Like for me personally, reading started out as a hobby. As a child you read Enid Blyton, etc., and Harry Potter, and then you get into business reading, and then again as a journalist, it's a way of life. So, do you have books that you read for pleasure as well, or is it just that you restrict yourself to more business reading?
I think over the last couple of years, I have stopped reading for pleasure because I think fiction has been replaced by Netflix.
Hmm,
So, I mean, maybe I'll reread a Harry Potter book, or maybe Sherlock Holmes or something like that. But in the last couple of years, maybe the last 5 years, I have just like 90-95% it's nonfiction. It's either nonfiction or blogs, or
hmm,
one another interesting hack is that if you like an author and if you like a book, so for example, Kristen Clayton wrote Innovator's Solution, Innovator's Dilemma. What I
right.
also do is I search the name of the author on YouTube and get a list of talks that they have given. In 90% of the cases, the talks they have given are about the book. So you will definitely get a 160-minute or a 90-minute talk about the book, or about the the topics of the book by the
Hmm,
author.
hmm,
And you can grasp the knowledge that they have written in the book in a much
hmm.
more engaging manner, where they are probably teaching on a whiteboard or a blackboard, or they're engaging with the audience. So that's an interesting hack that I follow.
Right, right. And this seems to have permeated into books at large, right? If I compare a business book of 15 years back and today, the ones today actually seem more accessible. I see most of them have, notes after each chapter saying this is what we outlined. Then at the end of the book, again to summarize, this is what we've done. This is what is your takeaway. If you're writing for companies, they specifically say that this is how you can implement this in your company. That business facing tone seems to be new. Would you agree?
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. I mean, whether it's Atomic Habits or any other book, I think I saw this in Atomic Habits recently, and
Correct.
even in Blitzscaling. So I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize this. I just got the revelation, but you're right about this.
Correct, correct. It's interesting you mentioned blitzscaling. I mean, for our audience, I'll give some context. Blitzscaling is by Reid Hoffman and Chris Ye. Reid Hoffman, and of course, the co-founder of LinkedIn, and now a VC at Greylock. And it's about how companies can scale fast, about how you can win markets. It also comes with a warning. It says that not every company should blitzscale. The whole process of raising a lot of money very quickly, of hiring very quickly, of trying to win a market should be done only when it's a winner take all market, when it's absolutely necessary. Have you been able to apply this to Unacademy, Gaurav?
See, what happens is that, at different stages of the business, you find relevance in different books. For example, blitzscaling was, for our core business, etc. Blitzscaling was very relevant, and we learned a lot of lessons when it was, let's say, 2018, 2019, 2020. Now, what we are trying to do is that, one of our objectives in the next 24 months is to do an IPO. And the other objective is to do more 0 to 1 projects. So what I also find interesting is that, yes, I'm able to apply a lot of those things, but it's also about timing. So a book like 0 to 1 is more relevant for me today than a book like Blitzscaling, because we have already blitzscaled, let's say, one business, which is the test prep product of ours, which is now probably doing $120 million annual revenue run rate. Fairly stable. We'll get to profitability in the next couple of months. So what we are also now trying is that how can we build more innovative products and disrupt the sector? Like we did something amazing in the main product, which was like 0 to 1, and then it blitzscaled very fast. So it's like answering your question directly. It's about timing. But yes, we are able to apply a lot of stuff and learn from it. Blitzscaling is in fact one of the books where I made proper notes, and I keep re-referencing them because it's one of the most iconic books if you're starting a company, if you're starting an internet business, it is a mandatory book to read. Hello?
I'm sorry, I just went off there for a second. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Gaurav, you were saying that at this point it's actually 0 to 1, which is more relevant to you. Do you want to take me through one or two specific lessons that 0 to 1 helped you with? When you can look at Unacademy and say, this is the place where I applied 0 to 1.
See, I think the biggest lesson I learned from 0 to 1 is that competition is for losers. You are better off building a 0 to 1 idea where you create a monopoly. For example, over the last couple of years, Google and Microsoft have been just worried about competing with each other and fighting with each other. So if Google went into cloud, Microsoft would go into cloud. So they have been going into the same spaces. They are trying to compete for the same market. And that does not lead to one getting monopoly because you're not creating new products. So instead of worrying about competition and instead of worrying about fighting with your competition, what you should be worrying about is inventing new markets. And Apple, which was like, Microsoft and Google were much, much, much ahead of Apple. But in the
Correct.
last couple of years, Apple has exceeded both of them, and like by a huge margin. I think they are at 2 trillion. Apple is at 2.4 trillion, or whatever. Like Apple became the most valuable company because it did not see itself competing with Google or Microsoft. It invented something new. So I think this is the biggest lesson that we keep on applying to ourselves, because as founders, we are taught to love competition from the day we are born, and especially in a country like India. Your fourth standard marks are important, your sixth standard marks are important, whether you cleared NTSC is important, whether you cleared JE is important. And I know I run a business about it, so and that's the irony. But I mean, but what is also important is that at some point you need to realize that competition is necessarily not good, especially when you are building businesses. And this is another book which I'm reading, which is called Play Bigger, which talks about you creating your own category, you creating your own markets, you doing something which has never been done before, and then disrupting that and creating a monopoly in that, than worrying about that, and this is something as founders we do, that, oh, that person is doing this, let me also do that. Because as humans, we just love to compete. and it is
Correct.
so easy to get lost in that competition. I think this is my biggest lesson from 0 to 1.
That's true. That's true. And Gaurav, when we were speaking earlier, one of the books that you also mentioned was the Nike book, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. In
Yes.
what was your takeaway from there? And I'll give some context where most of the big books we've discussed so far are very startup and internet specific books. They are playbooks that can help you nail that market and understand things perfectly. It's almost like a recipe of do's and don'ts. Whereas Shoe Dog is almost a story. You can have takeaways from it, but I don't think it's aimed to be written that way. What was your takeaway from it?
I think Shoe Dog, I would characterize it at somewhere between fiction and non-fiction. And the lessons, like I think it's about the psychology of the founder, and especially how the founder thinks in situations, how he stumbled upon the ideas, etc. For example, there is a very interesting quote in that book, which I can relate to even today, is that, and this is, we are talking about 50 years back. So fundamentals of entrepreneurship haven't changed. For example, Phil Knight talks about that every evening somebody would call him and give him the updates of how many shoes were sold today.
Hmm.
And on days, if there were many shoes sold, he would have a great mood. And on other days, he would not, like if shoes sold are less. So his mood would be dependent a lot on the shoe sales. And it is so relevant to founders of today as well. I was just telling someone that 80% of my happiness is sort of directly proportional to the monthly or the weekly numbers that the company is doing.
Hmm.
And these small anecdotes where you realize the true fundamental nature of entrepreneurship, etc. I think it's a must read for everyone. It talks about relentlessness. It talks about brand building. It talks about the issues that they faced in the beginning. Like the company went through multiple near death experiences, but they still came out of it. So I think it's a story of grit. It's a story of relentlessness. It's a story of not giving up. It's a story of innovation, on how Mr. Bowerman, who was the co-founder of Nike, invented a new shoe whose idea came from, I think, pancakes, or I think it was like it was a food item that gave him the idea of that. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story, and I would definitely keep it in my top five all-time favorite reads. But it's
I
this is
agree.
this is one of the books that I like I have read just once. This is
Hmm.
more like a leisurely reading, just like Steve Jobs. Whereas 0 to 1 is more non-fiction, where I'm constantly making notes and highlighting stuff, etc.
Correct, correct. We have a lot of new people joining us. For those joining us right now, we're discussing books with Unacademy's Gaurav Munjal. This is part of a regular series that Moneycontrol will be doing, discussing books with interesting people in India's startup community. Lots of familiar faces. Hi Anubhav, hi Sakshi. We're also getting a lot of questions. We'll call up a few people in some time. Gaurav, how do you decide what to read? Do you already have a list of the next 10 books you're going to read? Do you discover it on the fly? Do you rely on people? What is the discovery process like?
I think in the last couple of years, my reading list was decided by Bhavin. So I think he was a very avid reader, and this is something that I picked up from him. He's one of our mentors and board members at Unacademy, and he has this blog post. I think it's on the Flock blog, where he has written the list of best 39 books to read. I think any entrepreneur who goes through that list and reads those books, and he has literally segmented those books in terms of marketing, sales, product, growth, and those are probably the best set of books that every entrepreneur should read. I have read 60-70% of them, and I think books like Traction, 22 Immutable Laws of Branding, Product Management by Intercom, I think those are some of my favorite books, and very, very, very helpful if you're trying to build a business.
Right. Talk to us about 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. That's one I'm actually yet to read. But the place that I come from is brand, I feel, is a very misunderstood concept. There are lots of people who think that some companies survive merely on a brand. which obviously will then be only in the short term. But I think the book argues that it's something that's essential to every company's survival. Take me through your takeaways from it.
See, at the end of the day, what 22 Immutable Laws of Branding is about is that brand is about owning and standing up for something. It's about owning a keyword in the mind of customers. If for some, for example, let's say live learning. If every time somebody thinks about live learning, they can think about Unacademy, then we have built a strong, very strong brand in our market for the product Unacademy. Then it also talks about how you are better off starting a new brand for something, some like a different use case, etc. For example, if we have a different product, then you're better off starting a new brand rather than brand extensions. But this is something I don't fundamentally believe in, because in India especially, if you take the case of Tata, um, Tata has had, or Hero has had, multiple brand extensions, and that has worked very well. So I think it's also very different that how Asian companies are built versus how Western companies are built, and I believe that brand extensions in Asian companies still work very well. But it's definitely like it's a must read for a first time founder, because you start thinking about your brand much more than you were. Because founders don't think about brand, founders think about product, founders think about fundraising, they think about getting traction. But brand as a concept is something that we don't think about, whereas I believe brand is like, it's one of the most fundamental things that a founder should always be thinking about, apart from capital, product, team, um, traction channels. Apart from these, brand is one of the most important things, and it just opens you up to the world of branding. And then the next read that I would recommend is Ogilvy on marketing. I think that's another book on branding that's really, really good. And then you should also read 22 Immutable Laws on Marketing, Laws of Marketing, etc. I think these three books on branding, really good.
Nice. If possible, we'll make a list at the end of this of all the books we've discussed, because I'm sure people would love that takeaway. Gaurav, on branding, did your thoughts on branding and this book also affect your acquisition strategy? Because when you acquire a company, one of the first questions is always, do we integrate this into Unacademy, or do we retain the existing brand and let them use our best features?
I think it's very case specific. We have had M&As where, for example, Prep Ladder, the company that we acquired, which is the number one test prep company for the NEET PG segment, they had a very strong brand for that segment. And they stood for great recorded content and notes, etc., for that market. There is no point in changing the brand name, because it already stands for something. So when people think about NEET PG online learning, they think about Prep Ladder. So that brand has already owned a keyword in the mindset of people. It has, so literally that brand is created. Now why would we change something that's working? I don't think we even added buy Unacademy to that logo or something like that. So I think it's very case specific. And in the case of Wi-Fi study, because that was a category that had to be integrated at Unacademy, we started saying Wi-Fi study by Unacademy, etc., etc. So so it's a very case specific thing. We usually analyze the market. We usually analyze how strong the brand is in that particular market. Sometimes when we do M&As, founders are emotional about keeping their brand name. So if they negotiate that in the agreements, I mean, we have to honor that. Sometimes people understand, they are very practical about the brand names, etc. So it's very case specific. Sometimes you just keep a brand. Sometimes you have to even honor the motivation levels of the company you have acquired, like the founders of the company you have acquired, and and that's fine. I mean, when you do enough M&As, you realize that there is no black and white, everything is gray. So yeah,
Makes sense. Swathi, anything you want to add? Swathi, are you there? Let me also bring in some of our audience questions in between. We have Anubhav Goyal from Chirate. He should join us soon. Hi,
Hi
Anubhav.
Gaurav. Hi Hi Gaurav, hi Sriram.
Hey, Anubhav.
Hi
Go
Gaurav.
on.
Great to hear from you. I had quick two questions, right? I and just the first question was, just extending the concept of reading to beyond books, right? I think today there are a lot of timeless blogs and newsletters and other forms of reading that's also come up, right? So just curious to understand, like, how do you kind of bifurcate the time there, or like what do you see the value of books, which let's say these forms of content do not offer? Just very curious to understand your thoughts about reading
See, I
these
think
different forms of content.
lately, earlier it used to be just books, but today a lot of my learning happens on YouTube. Because let's say if I want to know more about a company, what I usually do is I I on YouTube, I search for the name of the founder. And for that founder, I would find at least two, three talks that the founder has given. And these are very, very high quality talks. For example, one of the founders that I really like is Frank Slootman. And some of the content that he has created on YouTube is just amazing. And you should go, or even Reed Hastings or Don Valentine of Sequoia. There are some, there is some, and then you have a talk called Inflection Points. This is a lecture that Andy Grove gave, um, you know 30 years back, 40 years back at Stanford. Amazing lecture on companies and their inflection points. So I think it's both. It's a combination of books. Like, for example, some books are really well written, and if I have to quickly hear something, etc., then I go for the YouTube talks, and they are much more engaging. So I think it's a combination of YouTube and books. And then books I prefer listening to on Audible and making notes than reading them.
Okay, interesting. Got it. Got it. And my quick second question is around the process of note taking, right? I very strongly believe that's a very important part of reading books, right? But there are certain books, let's say, which have like a two-liner kind of a takeaway, right? And there are books, let's say, where there are many interesting quotes or facts that maybe you would want to use later on when you're kind of building that part of the business. So how does your note taking change with like different types of books? Like, do you go into that much of a depth while deciding that okay, this is the book in which I'll be going in this depth, or do you not just go along with it and kind of uh,
I mean, I'm a heavy note taker, so I usually make notes for everything. So I, like, probably for most books, I'll have chapter wise notes, um, uh,
definitely.
like proper chapter wise notes, like maybe 7, 8 pages of notes for each book I've read.
Got it. Got it. No,
That's that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Gaurav, do you also have a process to decide what not to read? I'm sure you have people recommending books, all the time to you. And from personal experience, the pitch is always, oh my God, this book is amazing. You have to check it out. But then you can't read everything. Do you have a filtration process of either genre or, any other way where you decide, no, this I don't want to read?
See, rather than what not to read, I have a process on what not to learn from it. Sometimes you will read something and that will be wrong info and it will not resonate with you. So I think one needs to get really, really good at what not to learn from something. After reading Steve Jobs, people start being more aggressive with their teams, or in general they become ruthless, etc. And maybe that's good, but maybe that is one part you could have avoided and learned something else. For example, there is a book called Becoming Steve Jobs, where when he returned to Apple in 1990, and I think I like Becoming Steve Jobs more than Steve Jobs. And when he returned to Apple in 1997, his whole journey of how he became a more mature leader, a more sensible leader, a more empathetic leader, it's a phenomenal book. So I think it's very and same if you read Elon Musk or the Everything Store, etc. It's really easy to pick the wrong things. So I have no I'll read everything. If it's boring, I'll just stop midway. But I have a very strong filter on, even from the best of the best people, what not to learn.
Makes
Uh,
sense. Yes,
Sriram,
Swathi, go.
I just have a couple of questions. See, first question is, see, when I read books, I have just one problem. There are just too many books on the same topics, right? How do you pick them? So to some extent, the authors can help the writers, but how do you pick so many the good books from so many of them? That is one question. You answer that, then I'll ask the next one.
See, what I usually do is that my discovery process usually happens once. So I'll go through the reading list of somebody I like. For example, I'll go through the list of books that Elon Musk has read, or the books that Bill Gates really likes, or or somebody will recommend some books to me. And then what I will do is I'll download all those books on my Kindle or Audible. So at any point of time, I have at least 100 books that I have not yet started. So the problem that most people face is that even when they want to start reading, they face the dilemma of what to read. I think what you can do is you can remove that friction out by at least buying 20 books that are really good that you have not read. So when your willpower allows you to actually start reading, you are not going through a decision fatigue on what book should I buy, etc., because you already have 20 books. You just need to start reading one of them.
And one more thing is that you learn a lot from books. So for executives, say how this particular book helped them do this. So even you have mentioned a lot about that. So, but reading these books, how did it help you change driving a cultural change in the company or in your life? So if you can just give me a couple of instances of how this helped drive cultural change in the company or in your life.
I mean, it's a pretty broad question. I think the answer to that is, whenever you learn something new and, you take time to absorb the principles of that, and then you start implementing and you start seeing results, then you do more of that. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like that. For example, I think one of the books that had biggest impact on my life was Traction earlier in the day, because as first time founders, when I was starting the first company, or even when we were starting Unacademy, we are always very obsessed about the features. The morning we are doing design reviews, evening we are playing around with the product, but we forget that there are things that are equally important. Traction is equally important. And especially if you're building a consumer facing internet business, fundraising is equally important. Team building is equally important. And what these books teach you, like for example, what Traction taught me is that, and once I read it, I became so much obsessed about it, that winning for a startup is equally dependent on traction than the product you have built. And then, there are scientific ways to think about how to grow your business. There are literal growth hacks. There are ways. So, they have a bullseye framework on how you can choose the right traction channel for your startup. So I think, you learn a concept and you get fascinated by it, and then you make a plan to implement that in your life. And it's when it works, you do more of it. So I think that's the answer to your question.
Fascinating. Over to you, Sriram.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more audience questions. I'll bring some of those people. Om, you can go.
Yeah. Hi, Gaurav. I don't know, this is a bit of a fan moment because I've been following you for a while now. But then, one thing which, I really admire is that, you continuously innovate, or anything which Unacademy does is all about innovation. So what is your framework around innovation? How do you ensure that you're not doing something which is already done, or how do you keep, pushing yourself and your team ahead in anything and everything?
See, I have a concept called Bhujia Company. I mean, this is an internal term that we use, that don't become a Bhujia Company. Bhujia Company means that you are a commodity business. Your product is maybe 10% better than others. You're making money by selling Bhujia type products, but you have not innovated on something for a long time. So I live in this constant paranoia and fear that Unacademy should not become a Bhujia company. And I hope it doesn't offend Bhujia founders, but I mean, this framework is what I live by, and that we should not become a commodity business. We have to do 0 to 1 experiments. We have to keep innovating, and for that, if the person, the people, the leadership team which is running the company, if they're not reading and learning and getting better themselves, then they won't be able to innovate. Then and obviously you have to learn, and then you have to keep experimenting and take the risks, because if you're doing 10 experiments, there is a good chance that 8 of them will fail. So I think this is what drives me. So from a fear level, the upside is that obviously you'll create and you'll innovate, and that's a very, very good feeling when you get product market fit. And if you end up creating something which is never done before and which is 10x better than anything else, the satisfaction that you get out of it is pure magic. Like, it's amazing. And on the other side, on the downside, I have this paranoia and fear that Unacademy should not become a bhujia company. So I think this is what motivates me.
Okay. Just another follow-up question. Like, now that you're talking about books, you've obviously one book which is No Rules of Netflix is something which is about innovation. But is there any other book which you suggest for, like, maybe some book or frameworks of innovation, or just how some companies innovated? Do you have any recommendations in that space?
I think you should read Innovators. I think you should read everything that Kristen Clayton has written. He has also given a talk on YouTube. It's Competing Against Luck, Innovator's Dilemma, Innovator's Solution. You should read 0 to 1. You should read Play Bigger. I think these are some of the big books you should read on innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
We have a lot more people. I'll just call someone else as well.
Hey Gaurav, Sriram, Swathi, hi.
Hey, Spandan.
Gaurav, what are a few of the books which have challenged your traditional way of thinking and which has totally changed your thought process after that, and you've implemented that?
I think Traction was definitely one of them. 0 to 1 was one of them. Lately, there is this book called Relentless. I think Relentless talks about very interesting stuff. I think you should definitely read Relentless. Oh, and there is a phenomenal book called Exponential Organizations. Once you read Exponential Organizations, you will just start completely thinking in a different manner about everything. So I think that's one book that you should definitely read. And then obviously biographies of people like Benjamin Franklin, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. I think these are really good.
Great.
Nice. Gaurav, do you remember the first sort of non-fiction or business book you read, or what converted you to sort of this community today?
I don't remember the first non-fiction book I read.
Or at least one of the early ones. I mean, which made you realize that, okay, this is an interesting genre. This is something I need to read more often.
I mean, no, I started with biographies. I started with, Richard Branson's book. And I actually don't remember, but what I can do is after this, I can share a list of books that I recommend to everyone to read, and then you can probably tweet that out. Oh, and there is one more book that I would like to talk about. It's called The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. It's a life-changing book. It's an amazing book. Like, everyone should definitely read it.
Talk about it a bit.
So The Score Takes Care of Itself is about this coach, Bill Walsh, and about his principles of running teams and companies, etc. And he ran a team called San Francisco 49ers, which came in the bottom of the Super Bowl for I think 5 times. And then once Bill Walsh came, they became number 1. And he spoke about small things like, we think about winning in terms of big things, but when he came into the team, he started fixing the small things. For example, players should tuck in their t-shirts. For example, the receptionist should answer the phone properly and always on time. So, these small things. And then it talks about principles. And, there are 12 principles that Bill Walsh has, etc. It's a life-changing book. Everyone should read it.
Interesting. I will add this to the list as well. We've got a lot more people asking questions. There's a lot of fun. We've got Akshay Madan now. Akshay should be on the stage any moment now.
Hi guys, hi Gaurav. Big fan of Unacademy and congratulations on your success. Uh, so I just had a question. Like Elon Musk said, Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, being a fiction, was one of his inspirations before he started SpaceX. But do you have any fiction books? Like I joined in a bit late. I just listened to all the non-fiction you mentioned. Any fiction book that you're a big fan of?
I think that was the first question that Sriram asked. Unacademy's company name is Sorting Hat Technologies Private Limited, and Sorting Hat is a character in Harry Potter. So I think that should answer your question.
Got it. Thanks.
Gaurav, have you thought of writing a book yourself? I mean, maybe not now, maybe later.
I actually wrote a book story, like a novella, 40 page, 50 page, when I was in 10th standard. I loved writing, so I still do, but like on Quora and blogs, but probably not a book. But I love in like writing blog posts. It's more easier, and if you just combine those blog posts, it can be formed into a book. But I love writing in general, and I think tweets and blogs are a much better way to write today.
Right. Of course, I mean, speaking of your blog, I should also mention that his Substack is called Mischief Managed, which is another Harry Potter reference.
Yeah.
Which is also fun. Gaurav, you want to go? We have another speaker. And we have two Gauravs.
Hi, Gaurav. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So, Gaurav, I want to ask you that currently in the edtech space, right, there is one notorious player, Byju's particularly, which has really put a bad name to the entire edtech space in India. Does that affect Unacademy and other players who might genuinely be trying to provide something of value to people in any way?
No, I think what happens is that in every, and I'm not saying that what Byju's has done is right or wrong. What I'm saying is that in every sector, there are companies which might not have ethics in general, but I don't think it impacts the other ethical companies. For example, I'll tell you one interesting statement. Unacademy had 0 cases of mis-selling out of the sales team we have in March. 0 cases, because that's a KPI we track, because that's our fundamental principle. So I don't think that, I think at the end of the day, if your products are great, if your brand is great, etc., I think only that matters. I also feel that Byju's gets more flack than he deserves. I think they have made good products. I wouldn't call them great, but I would call them good. And for a particular segment, those products work really well. So I think in the Twitter universe, we sometimes, we forget that that's a bubble. I mean, that's not real India. There are a lot of people who are benefiting from products of other competitors, and it would be wrong of me to say that there is some, every company has some wrong processes, and but what is important is that they acknowledge them and they fix that.
Okay. Another question actually I have, a short one. This is actually again going back to the conversation we were having earlier regarding branding. So for me, for example, it's been years since I've graduated, and I'm currently not looking towards higher education or anything. But I actually found out about Unacademy when I was actually watching a TV series called Quota Factory, which is a series made by TVF. So how did you come up with this idea of reaching out to masses through such OTT platforms and such content creators? Because what I realized that when you think, if you look at it from perspective of branding, this was a really great idea, because it really sets the tone that Unacademy is a brand or an organization that actually understands what the candidate goes through during such times. And did you not feel a certain amount of risk because you were actually associating your brand so tightly to, let's say, to a web series, which, if in case portrayed something in a negative manner, could have affected your brand as well?
See, I think just like in product, in branding also, you have to follow the high risk, high return philosophy. For example, in IPL, we have taken a risk this time, and our ads on IPL will start airing from 15th of the month. They are very quirky and unique, and it is something that has never been done before. Now if it works, it will really, really work, but it's a high risk. There is a chance that they might not work, because we didn't follow the low risk philosophy that either we want it to completely work or we want it to completely fail, and we would continue to build products like that, brand like that, traction channels like that. So similarly, from day one, because we were YouTube creators ourselves, we realized the importance of YouTube, and we realized that YouTube as a platform is giving us a lot of branding and traction. And whether it's filter copy or TVF, etc., they were creating good content, and they had distribution that would bring a lot of views. So we did a web series with filter copy called Operation MBBS. We did one with TVF called Kota Factory. There is another one whose trailer was launched yesterday called Aspirants with TVF. So I think this is something that has worked for us, and this is something that our audience can relate to. We can get relevant audiences, we can start conversations about it, etc. And that's the reason we did it. But it's a humble request to everyone, if we can keep the questions to books and none. Yeah. How much time do we have, Sriram?
15 minutes. Is that fine?
Yes.
Yeah. Gaurav, I was asking, we were talking about the Netflix book earlier, No Rules. And it's in many ways transformational, about organization culture, about how companies can build and scale. Have you been able to implement parts of that into Unacademy? Because it's also a lot about culture. I don't know how many of those things can be implemented in an Indian company. It needs trust, it needs a leap of faith, it needs a certain way of thinking. How do you view that?
See, even in No Rules, they are not telling you to implement everything in one go. So the
True.
authors are telling you to do it in a phased manner. And if you do it in a phased manner, it is definitely possible to implement it completely. What I also believe is that not every company is supposed to be the same. Apple is about keeping everything a secret, whereas Netflix and Google are about more transparency, etc. I think again, it goes back to the fundamental principle that it is very important to know what to learn from where and what to ignore. I think you should read everything, but finally you should use what works for you, what aligns with your vision and your principles, and your fundamental ways of running a company.
I think Manvi or Ashutosh, one of you, if you can go ahead and ask your questions.
Thanks, Swathi. Hi, I just wanted to ask Gaurav that if he was given a chance to grab a pint or a cup of coffee with some author, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
It's a very tough question. I would definitely want to meet J.K. Rowling, because I have grown up reading Harry Potter, and I'm a huge fan. And I really, really, really like the books of Christian Clayton. Sadly, he passed away, I think last year or last to last year. So I would have wanted to meet him and learn from him. Then I would want to meet Tim Grover, the author of Relentless, one of the books that I really like. And the fourth one would be Bill Walsh of The Score Takes Care of Itself.
Thanks. The first one's extremely relatable, but thank you.
Ashutosh, go for it.
Hey, Gaurav, Swathi, Sriram. I've got two questions. The first question being, Gaurav, if you had to give one book to a guest that comes to your house, what book would be gifted?
Gift one book to?
The guest
A guest who comes to your house.
I mean, I can't, there is no one book that every guest would like. So it would depend on a lot of factors like age, etc. But it's a very broad question. If it's an entrepreneur, I would probably recommend a biography or something like that. If it's a teenager, then I would give them a Harry Potter or something like that. So it's a very broad question. If you can be more specific, I think that would be helpful.
I meant the most gifted book. What book would change? Generally, everybody should read.
I think everybody should start with reading fiction. So a Harry Potter or a Sherlock Holmes or an Enid Blyton is something that's how you start your reading journey, by something which is very, very fascinating. And then once you develop a habit of reading, then you can start reading non-fiction books, etc.
Sure. The second question being, what's your opinion on these book summarizing apps, wherein you get a summary in a shorter sum?
I think they are a good tool to discover what books you should be reading. But overall, I don't think that the summary does anything for me. I think it's too small. What I do is, which I've repeated earlier in the session, but I'll repeat it again, is if I see a book, and what I'll do is I'll Google the name, I'll go to YouTube and search the name of the author, and find a talk that they have given about the book. That's usually for 60 minutes or 90 minutes, and it's very, very detailed. So I think that helps a lot.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. We have a lot of people who want to ask questions. Unfortunately, we have only 10 minutes. I'll try to take as many as possible.
So at 7:55, I have a hard stop. Can we just take 2 more questions?
Sure. Rohit, go for it.
Hey, thanks, Gaurav. So first of all, thank you for the Unacademy, those amazing videos of cricket which you posted of Sachin and after IPL 1. Coming to the book question, what would you recommend for a person who just started their career as a software developer?
What are your other interests like?
I like to code a lot, and like Sherlock Holmes mystery type interest also. So I'm reading Sherlock Holmes also.
I think you should. I think what I found is that software engineers who are also great product people, I think you should read a few books on product management also.
Oh yeah, I'm interested in SaaS also, like software as service. Yeah, so
read this book called Intercom on Product Management.
Okay.
This was published by Intercom. It's one of the best books to start reading more about product management. It's really, really good. And then there is another book which you'll like. It's called Algorithms to Live By.
Oh yeah, I have the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thing, Intercom, I couldn't get the name. Sorry.
Intercom on Product Management.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Awesome. This is our last audience question from Govind. Go for it. Govind, your voice is shaky. Are you guys able to hear him? Gaurav?
Yes, I'm able to hear you. I think Govind's network has an issue.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get a better connection. So
I think we can take somebody else from the audience.
Yeah, I think we'll just, yeah, I'm just bringing someone else. We'll have a final audience question in a moment. I've just added in.
Gaurav, when you're reading,
yeah, he doesn't seem to be joining.
Yeah, so Gaurav, I just thought just to fill in the gap. So when you read multiple books, right? Even I have a habit of reading multiple books. So how do you prioritize reading these multiple books? Because I read between fiction and non-fiction. I alternate between fiction and non-fiction. How do you do how do you prioritize?
I mean, non-fiction I read for the pact that I have made to myself that I will read for 30 minutes every day.
Okay.
And what I choose in non-fiction depends on my mood and the stage of company and what I'm going through. So let's say 6 months back, we were trying to optimize our sales processes, etc. So I was reading multiple books about sales.
Mm.
So yeah, it's and then anything else apart from that 30 minutes is usually on the mood.
All right, got it. Do we have someone, Sriram?
No, I think that's all. I think we'll conclude the session. This is Gaurav's hard stop also. Gaurav,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this. I mean, it's great to have you here. And I mean, discussing books with startup people, it's really a pleasure to do this. And I think we've got enough book recommendations from you to keep us all busy for a very, very long time, which is a good thing.
And thanks a lot for inviting me. I think it was a pleasure to be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you, Gaurav. Good luck. Thanks everyone who's been listening in. Please stay tuned for the sessions. We'll be having lots more interesting people to talk to about books. Thank you.
Yeah. Goodbye, guys.